All right, let's get this party started. Welcome to the 5th year of the Badass Women Entrepreneurs event. Melissa, can you believe it's been 5 years already? It's crazy. Big shout out to our sponsor, Climate People. We'll be seeing a video about their organization and the work that they do a little bit later. But let's set the mood a little bit here. Why do we do this event? So at VertueLab, we're tackling some of the climate crisis and other environmental problems by supporting the brilliant people, some of which you're going to meet today, of some of the people that we've been working with. They have tech innovations that will replace old, crappy, carbon-intensive, pollutive systems that definitely need to go and need improvement. We're there through the super early stage with them. It often takes sometimes 5-10 years until things really kick up. And so we're there to help them win federal grants, get interns, introductions to investors, working on their pitch, you name it. We're there in the beginning, even funding. But as we do this work, we've obviously discovered that there's not a lot of diversity in the founders and in the leadership. A lot of times it's cis white males. And so we really wanted to get out there because there's obviously a lot of badass women with great ideas who are absolutely brilliant, doing tons of work in the STEM field. But why are they not showing up in this space as innovators and as founders? So we couldn't think of a better organization to team up with than our friends over at Women in Science, PDX, and Melissa that joins me today. I'll invite you to talk to folks a little bit more about Women in Science and what you're doing there.
Thank you, Tricia. I'm happy to be here today. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Mudd. I'm a board member for Women in Science Portland, and I am so pleased to be here with you all at the 5th annual Badass Women Entrepreneur event, and also to introduce Women in Science Portland. So our mission is to build a supportive community of networks for the development, retention, and promotion of individuals from any marginalized gender across all fields of science. And we engage with youth and K-12 programs all the way through higher education and leadership roles to support gender equality in STEM. Our most sought after offering is called Negotiation Bootcamp. And this is a program where participants learn to identify negotiation opportunities and flex like a badass negotiator. We also have professional development seminars, women supporting women groups, networking events, and other ways to get involved and get supported. This event is incredibly important to us, not only because these panelists are so inspiring and doing some incredible work, but entrepreneurship is another area, particularly in STEM fields, where the gender disparities, as well as other race, ethnicity, or ability disparities are hugely disproportionate. And we want to raise up these amazing people doing this amazing work and normalize diversity. Also importantly, we're thrilled to continue partnering with VertueLabs to bring you this event and continue highlighting badass women entrepreneurs for 5 years and many more to come. If you're interested in learning more about Women in Science Portland, joining our mailing list, or hearing about events or volunteering, I will post some links in the chat. Enjoy, everyone.
Thanks, Melissa. That's awesome. So yeah, every year when we get together to plan this, and we several of us rally around and we think about like who's been moving and shaking lately as far as entrepreneurs out in this field, whether they come from the clean tech space or the biotech, especially a lot of the women and the representation in Women in Science is really, folks from OHSU and other medical technologies as well. So welcome all from STEM innovation. That's what we're here to celebrate. So let's bring up Kim, our moderator, who is fantastic. I'm sure once you hear more about her and the several hats that she wears, you'll understand why we invited her to be our moderator today. So welcome, Kim, to Badass Women Entrepreneurs. You want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and then take us in to meet our panelists?
Yeah, would love to. Super excited for this. To be totally candid, it was my first time hearing about Badass Women Entrepreneurs, but after hearing the name, I was like, yeah, I want to be involved. That sounds badass. Right. Well, cool. Let me give a quick intro on myself, but I think the exciting part is definitely the intros on the people on the panel. Quick background on me. I've been focused on climate for as long as I can remember. Have always been really fascinated by how we can deploy capital and innovation towards solving and addressing climate. Moved to Silicon Valley 2-3 years ago, saw a bunch of startups and technologists working on things like TikTok and crypto, and biggest problem of our generation is climate change. And so 2 years ago, started thinking about how can we use technology and innovation to address this climate crisis that we're in right now. And that was really the genesis of starting Climate Tech VC, which is a leading resource on climate and innovation. So we cover venture deals in the space, news headlines that are impacting climate tech. We'll do deep dives, uncovering different verticals of climate tech, like carbon markets or sustainable seafood or energy data. We'll interview founders, investors, and market experts in this space just to really kind of continue to get the ball rolling on how we can accelerate climate innovation. And so have been doing that over the last 2 years with a really amazing team of other kind of part-time volunteers, grown to 25,000 subscribers, which still amazes me to this day, and has just been really awesome to see how much the ecosystem has grown. Day job, my other hat I wear is as an investor at Energy Impact Partners, which is a $2.5 billion venture capital firm funded and backed by a lot of companies shaping the energy landscape of the future. So some of the largest utilities, mobility companies, real estate companies in the world, and have the day job of working with and investing in really amazing entrepreneurs in the climate tech space. So that's quick background on me, but want to get to obviously the rest of the entrepreneur panel, starting with Wendy Owens, who is the founder and CEO of Hexas Biomass, which is a biomaterials company producing plant-based raw materials. She's a serial entrepreneur with experience across multiple industry. Hexas combines her background in materials engineering and biotech with a passion to save the earth. And concurrently with past entrepreneurial endeavors, she spent 14 years as an executive level appointed advisor to the US Secretary of Commerce and US Trade Representative. She's a published author in a variety of subjects and has a Master of Art degree from Tufts University. Second badass woman is Tanya, who's the CEO of Community Energy Labs, which is a woman-owned and led energy technology company with a mission to enable affordable decarbonization of community buildings by 2030. CEL's core AI-powered clean building control platform was a regional winner of Cleantech Open's 2020 International Accelerator, overall winner in 2020 Madrona Venture Labs, and tons of other different awards and competitions. CEL emerged from the nonprofit PECI as a nimble social enterprise with a suite of grid edge and community-centric IT approaches to climate adaptation, local empowerment, and clean energy. They bring 1.5 million in IP value, market research, project development work funded and performed by PECI between 2016 and 2019. And the team has a track record of 20 plus years spanning startups to organizations like Southern California Edison, NASA, and Southern Company. Next on to Carlanda, who is the founder and CEO of Bodify, which is a platform that leverages computer vision and artificial intelligence to help online shoppers find brands that will best fit their bodies. She received her MBA in entrepreneurship from UMKC and has started a number of tech-enabled companies over the past decade. She's been listed as one of Kansas City's top 10 startups to watch and 20 innovators to know. And having grown up in an entrepreneurial family, she understands the importance of seeing diverse representation across industries and in various roles. It's a personal goal of hers to ensure the next generation of founders are entering an equitable, low barrier ecosystem to create in. And as a mompreneur, Carlanda spends her free time at basketball and baseball games and practices, and now accepts that chicken strips and pizza are a standalone food group. She also thoroughly enjoys wine and is a pad thai connoisseur. Wow, lots of really exciting hobbies and skill sets there. So that's a quick intro to everyone. I think maybe the interesting question to get started on, which is probably why a lot of you folks are here too, is tell the story behind your company, but also how your journey to this point. How did the company first develop? What were some of the challenges and early stage opportunities that you saw and are now building to address? And what was the journey really up until this point that led you to where you are today? Maybe we can start from the last person I mentioned, with Carlanda.
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. So you asked a few different questions and I was trying to jot them down, but I think I'll just start with sort of what got me here in terms of Bodify and what we're building and how our approach is a bit different to what isn't currently working. So I started on this sort of entrepreneurial journey. As Kim mentioned, this is not my first startup. It probably won't be my last either, but it started as a journey to solve a personal problem, right? I think a lot of startups set out that way. I did not set out to affect climate change or really anything along those lines. I just wanted to be able to shop online easier. It was during the customer discovery and research of that idea that I did discover just how negative the impact of buying clothes online that don't fit is. So to give you an idea, there's about $100 million in online clothing sales that happen every year. And about 50% of those end up being returned. And the number one reason for returns is fit. So you can surmise that if you get ahead of the fit issue, people don't send their clothes back. Another thing to note about that is we think or we assume that most of our clothing returns end up being resold to someone else. And the gotcha is that they don't. I think the last statistic I read was somewhere around 9 to 10% of municipal waste is brand new solid clothing. So retailers don't actually resell most of what they get back. They either send it in, like offload it into landfills, or if they're super brand conscious, they will incinerate it, just burn it up because they don't want photos of their brand in landfills floating around the internet, or they will sell textiles in bulk to less developed countries for various uses. But what that ends up doing is tanking the economies in these other countries. So there are no good outcomes from making returns, right? So that's essentially why we exist. There are some other entities addressing this issue. However, because of COVID and some other reasons, returns are at an all-time high right now, and they're just growing. So, it's easy to say that what people are doing now doesn't work. I got a question. Marilyn asked, why don't they donate? Well, the capitalist answer is because it takes too much time. It takes too much time. It takes too much energy. It is just plain easier to throw things away. And that's why they do it. So the easiest solution now is to just keep people from returning things. And the best way to do that is to make sure people are buying what they should be buying. And that's what Bodify does. I don't remember your other questions, Kim. I'm sorry.
All good, all good. Maybe I'll take them one at a time, so we can let the other panelists share quickly what they're working on as well.
Sure.
Awesome. Maybe Tanya, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Tanya Barham. How did I get here? Also not my first startup, but different from Carlanda, I do plan on this one being the last. I have a long track record guiding transformative energy technologies through the valley of death to commercial success. So from R&D all the way to scale. So I started my career in software and uptime management for large power plants. And then from there, I moved on to solar photovoltaics after that. And that was in the early 2000s when literally the people that were installing these were guys. They were all guys. They had long gray ponytails, and all they installed was like off the grid systems. They might all have been high as well. I'm not sure. Pot was not legal then, so we didn't talk about it, but I'm reading the signs. Just kidding. And I was employee number 35 at PECI, Portland Energy Conservation Inc. It was the nation's first energy conservation program in the 70s, but it grew to be a $75 million a year, 400-person company and a staple of the energy industry. I left PECI after a big period of growth to start my own healthcare technology company, sold that company, and then rejoined PECI after they had sold to Clear Result as employee number 2. And so I helped them reinvent themselves, as Kim mentioned before, between 2016 and 2019. And then I spun off the intellectual property that we developed, which won the Smart Electric Power Alliance's Visionary of the Year Award to start community energy labs. The reason I tell you all of this, though, is to say that, you know, when it comes to startups with energy management pitches, I feel like I've seen it all in my years in this industry. I've invested in and I've managed those technologies for utilities and at PECI. In fact, my CTO was the CEO of a technology company that I invested in both as an angel and an institutional. So, you know, what was different between then and now? Well, now there are actual laws and utility prices that have teeth, and a lot of them. So I started CEL because I saw this same kind of curve when the solar and wireless monitoring industries began to take off in the early 2000s. And I knew that the time was right to just gather up a capable team and apply what I learned about navigating this curve to building energy. So buildings generate 40% of global carbon emissions. 70 to 80% of that is from importing energy, is their use of energy and importing their electricity from the grid. So we have a technology, an IoT and software as a service technology that helps better match when buildings are using energy with when renewables are producing it.
Awesome. Really cool to hear all your experience. And then last but not least, Wendy.
Thank you. And like the other two badass entrepreneurs, this is not my first rodeo. So I actually have, my background is more materials engineering and biotech. And I was working in biotech and just more and more prevalently come forward that we've had this massive climate issue. And whereas I like to help people and people with rare diseases and work in genetics and so forth, I had to stop and go work for the earth. I think that's maybe sounds a little corny, but that was what I needed to do. So I actually came across this plant that looks like corn and bamboo had a baby. It's very tall, but with leafy green. It's in the wild. And then I developed from that our varieties of a giant perennial grass that we use to substitute for wood and food crops in energy production, as well as fossil fuel-based feedstocks like plastics and so forth. So we are way up the supply chain, but I felt very comfortable there, given my materials engineering background and the work that I've done with the US government and understanding what is necessary for downstream for companies to actually be able to make a change to a much more sustainable product. So there are about 15 million trees, billion trees cut down every year. And that really is far too many. We can do better by using like this perennial grass that we produce, which grows on the land, doesn't displace crops, low water, low input, etc. And I didn't know all this when I was coming into it. I just thought, oh, this is a really cool plan. I think from an engineering perspective, it would have lots of applications. But it also is an EPA approved bioenergy crop and meets those renewable fuel standards. And we can make ethanol all the way up to sustainable aviation fuel. So there's lots of applications, which makes us sometimes look like, oh my gosh, you can do everything and you're not very focused. But the focus is on sustainable production through regenerative agriculture of our product to produce drop-in fiber substitutes for these other products. So I hate seeing trees cut down, and I thought, wow, this could be one of those solutions. And that's where I came from.
That's awesome. And I didn't even know this, but one really interesting thread that you've all touched on is it's not your first rodeo. And everyone's kind of started a company before, done the entrepreneurship thing before, and is back for a second or third run. So off of that, I mean, would be really interested to hear about, you know, what were some of the learnings from your first or second initial entrepreneurship journeys, and how are you applying that today to your current company? Yeah, that would be super interesting. Maybe Carlanda, I don't know if you're ready. I saw you were jotting some stuff down, or I can go to Tanya first.
Sure, no, I can share a few thoughts. So some learnings from one of the biggest learnings from my first, both of my first two startups, are that what you set out to do may not be where you end up. And if you're open to that and curious about why things are changing or why you're having fits and starts, or really listening to the feedback of your stakeholders, then you can end up in a lane that is much, much more impactful than what you even started. And that's even something that I'm in practice with Bodify, because like I mentioned earlier, I was started out to just build a widget that can be embedded on the website. So, you know, people could easier find their sizes. And then from feedback around that, figured out that size is really relatively irrelevant. It's really brand, because all brands are cut differently and it has different sizes and all of that. And then when you start to look at the environmental impact, right? If I had just been laser focused on this is what I'm doing and I don't want any feedback and, you know, I know it all, then all of these other benefits that are happening now from what we're creating probably wouldn't be in motion. And I think it's really poignant what Wendy said about having lots of potential application to what you build, but still being focused. And that's where you can start kind of road mapping and planning out, but, you know, starting somewhere and not getting lost in the weeds about all the cool things that what you're building can do, but knowing that they can do all these things, and that's something that you should plan for.
Awesome. Maybe Tanya, do you want to share a bit more as well from your journeys?
Sure. Yeah, well, there's a lot to go over the years, but there are so many things that sort of stick out. Primarily, choose something that learning good boundaries is actually the first thing I would say. I think the first time I ever did something really entrepreneurial, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I have for the past couple of years worked like 70 hours a week. I'm a single parent too. So, you know, my kids watching a lot of shows. So, you know, balance isn't always like, you know, you get perfect balance all the time. And, you know, I talked to my kid about that. Like, this is just a moment in time, right? So I think one thing is, though, I would work basically 24/7, and I couldn't do that as a parent. So learning to sort of not be so personally invested in my company, to look at it more rationally like an investor. And because you are going to be invested, you are going to be working a lot, whether you're putting in your cash or your sweat equity or all of the above. You really need to have confidence in your company. And I have to admit, my last company, I got into it because I was a yoga instructor. And then I looked at opening a yoga studio and I'm like, oh, actually the business model is you're just subleasing space. So I'm going to do this, you know, bring yoga to corporations. And, you know, then it just grew. So I started that company. I never loved it. I didn't love my customers. I didn't love the business. I didn't raise money when other folks raised money. And so I was probably pretty undercapitalized. So I learned a lot about that. But I didn't mind because I just didn't want to grow with that company. I didn't care. And then the last recession hit and I was stuck with that company for like 5 more years before I could get rid of it. And I was just like, it was like being in a bad marriage. And so, you know, I came back to the energy industry because it's something that I just like, I can't get enough of it. And I love what I do. And I've always felt passionately about energy. I'm a true believer. So I think that's one thing. Another one is just selling and doing customer validation as soon as possible. So at my last company, I did learn during that recession, I was a single parent with a baby who was really colicky. And then the recession hit and, you know, I had a wellness company and people were not exactly, wellness wasn't flying off the shelves when people were laying off 1/3 of their workforce. So I made over 1,000 cold calls in a year and sold 1 piece of business. The awesome thing that came from that though, is I am not scared of selling. Pick up the phone, always, as soon as possible. Get your advisors, get them on the website. The minute you think you know who a customer might be, start talking to people immediately. You're going to sound like an idiot. People are going to dismiss you. 2 years later, those same people are going to be begging to invest in your company. I kid you not. Just pick up the phone immediately and just call. We're saying badass women entrepreneurs, so I can say call your ass off. Just call people and just get out there and do it. And don't be scared to look stupid, because you're going to learn so much that the ones who think you look stupid are the ones who are going to look stupid in hindsight. So I think those are the biggest learnings for me, is just like get out there and start doing stuff and start talking to people about your idea. And also make sure that it's something that you really are willing to put it all on the line for. But then also don't put it all on the line, like find some remove.
That's so powerful. I love how you weaved all of that together. That's like a great bullet list to kind of a framework, honestly, to keep in mind, honestly. Super powerful stories. And then Wendy.
Yeah, I have to echo a lot of what the lady said, because I think for me, the customer discovery was absolutely essential, because I'd never been in this particular industry before. And industries multiple, again, because like Carlanda was saying, you have so many different potential applications of this. I had to go and call and make a fool of myself and say, no, really, I don't understand. I mean, someone asked me yesterday, do you understand my business? And I said, no, but I really want to sell your fiber. So, and he's like, okay, let me explain it to you, because he really wants to buy what I'm selling. So, that's so important, is the customer discovery. And don't call like, oh, and I contact people on LinkedIn. Hey, do you have 15 minutes? Can we just talk really quickly? I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm a startup. We're doing this. I cannot emphasize, you'll get no's, you'll tell people that, look, I just don't have time. Okay, they don't have time, but you'll get lots of people that will just say, yeah, let's talk. And then you end up on the phone for an hour and they're really interested, and it validates what you're doing. It really does. It validates that, do you have a good product, or do you need to tweak it a little bit? Do you need to tweak your message a little bit? Do you need to tweak the data you present a little bit? So I would say customer discovery is absolutely killer. And what I've done with this startup, which I didn't do with the previous ones, I got sort of funding early. I've self-funded this startup. So I will tell you that I have had a side job since the day I started this company, 8 to 10 hours a week as a clinical scientist for a biopharmaceutical company. And I have worked that hard. But I wanted to make sure that I had funding to help support my family. I mean, I have a husband and we have 2 incomes in the household, but I didn't want this to end, because planting something in the ground takes a little while for it to grow, right? So it's not like a software product where maybe it doesn't take as long, and no offense to software products, but we're a little bit on the agricultural cycle. So I wanted to make sure that I was contributing and supporting my family, that I also had some funding that I could use towards the company. And I think by this is my 4th time around, I'm super efficient about where I spend money. So I think that's really, really super critical, is that you really need to know where every penny is going and how it is best going to work for you. It just cannot be random. It has to be planned. And then I would also, even though I had done this before, I'd taken about a 10-year break, had some kids, and then they were old enough for mom to start doing some crazy entrepreneur stuff again. I did accelerators. So I've done 3 accelerators, including the Cascadia Clean Tech through VertueLab. And that was really important because, one, under COVID, I started the company and then sort of COVID hit, you couldn't really network. And the accelerator was an excellent way for me to network, to meet investors, to say, okay, this is what investors want, this is what they want to hear, how's the market going? So I would say that if you can, get into an accelerator and leverage that and other people's knowledge and the support that's out there for companies. So
That's awesome. And I think coming off of that, it sounds like, the initial first step is challenging. It's overwhelming. And I like what Tanya said about, you just got to start making calls and you just got to talking to customers. But at the same time, it's hard to do that on your own, and it's hard to know where to start. What were some of the initial resources that you've all leveraged at the very beginning of your journey that you found super helpful? It sounds like accelerators might be one of them. Mentors, any kind of like initial resources that really help you get off the ground and help you, think through that initial kind of customer discovery and product market fit. We can keep going in the same order if that's okay with you. I'm sorry, Carlanda, you always have to.
Well, so for me, it was a little bit different because I have 2 business degrees. So I kind of already knew or had an idea of like how to structure my company and where to go. In terms of getting resources, let's talk specifically about financial resources, because when I look at resources, I think financial and human and knowledge resources. So, and I had put in the chat, and as Wendy and Tanya were both talking about customer discovery and that being really huge, before you spend money building anything, you need to find out that people really want it. And you will spend money to build it unless you can make it yourself. So the best ways to do that are just picking up the phone. I actually just took a few $100s and flew out to Vegas and went to the Magic Trade Show, which is where all the giant brands go. And the buyers are there, the brand reps are there. And I very vivid, I didn't have appointments with anyone. I just went to the trade show floor and walked up to people at Calvin Klein, Unina, Nautica, all the brands, and said, hey, what do you think about a software that could help you reduce returns? What would it need to do? What are your biggest returns? What are you seeing? And just had conversations right there. Some of them were 5 minutes, some of them were 20 minutes. I even got some feedback where that caused us to pivot a bit, where people said, well, we have issues with returns through third parties, but we don't have issues with returns through our own site because people who shop with us know they're fit, but we can't get new customers. So those are all things that you can kind of build in. Another resource that I think is largely under tapped is the amount of, they're not huge grants, mind you, but $500 here, $1,500 there, $1,200 here, like pitch competitions. I won a $20,000 beta development grant, that helped me get my initial platform built. So just research. And now with everything being so kind of virtual and flat, you can look anywhere. I've done pitch competitions here in Kansas City. I've done them in Florida. I've done them in California. And it's all been virtual over the last 2 years. So definitely do not underestimate the ability to just raise money. I'm not a huge fan of talking about friends and family rounds because I believe the ability to raise a friends and family round is kind of like privilegey, but there are ways to still accomplish that without, seeming multi-level marketing-ish and like hounding your friends and family to invest in your company. And pitch competitions is one way to do that. Also, someone mentioned accelerators. And I saw in the chat, there was some questions and explanations about what accelerators are. A lot of accelerators come with an investment. Even if it's a modest investment, it's something. And it sort of really frees you up to be able to devote all of your time to your venture. And I too, Wendy, worked until last year. I had another full-time job at a health IT company for years and years and years. And the only reason that I was able to get my startup to where I got it to, because they paid me pretty well to, and I got really efficient at my job. But once you really start focusing on your company, you can't really work 60 hours a week on something else. Even legally, like if you take on investment, you cannot work at another company if you're the CEO of the company that's taking on investment. That's kind of getting into the weeds of things, but that's kind of my feedback there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tanya?
Yeah, I was just kind of starting to jot down some notes. I mean, Carlanda said so much that I'm worried about, repeating, but just like, yes, everything that she said. I'll be like, my answer is not super sexy in a lot of ways. Again, same thing about friends and family. I'm like one of the first people in my family to go to and graduate from college. I've got pictures of me from I grew up in a trailer park by a sewage treatment facility, like literally dried poop on our counters in the summer. Like we're poor. So I wasn't going to friends. I wasn't going to family. I have a bachelor's degree from a public university because that's what I could afford to pay myself through. So, but the sad truth of the matter is, like it or not, and I've stopped like perseverating on this a lot. Like there's bias in the system, big time. And I'm going to work to change it. I'm going to try to lift as I rise. Do that. Like even before you start a company, help other people out when you can. If you can't, just say you can't. but help them out, because you know what? You never know when it's going to benefit you, and it will. It's going to come back to you in the most positive ways by helping someone that you never had any personal stake in helping them. So I will just say, I've always had that bias. You get what you get with me. You either like me or you hate me, but this is who I am. And that's worked out in my favor over the 20 years, particularly
I've been in my community, because people know what to expect from me. And they know that what they're seeing is authentic. So I think be authentic.
I'm sorry, I think my microphone might have cut out. Sorry about that. Be authentic, and that helps you build your personal brand, which will help you a lot when you do go out and start, whether you meant for it to or not, someday it will help you. So for me, because I'm a known equation in my industry, which is very small, because I'm a known equation in my community, I was able to just raise our, we're 75% of the way through our first funding round. We were raising $1 million on a safe. We thank you, VertueLab invested in us yesterday officially. We're 75% of the way through. It was actually an investor who came to us and kicked off the round, and not the other way around. So I think build your personal brand, establish trust, do things for other people when you can, and don't say you're going to do something if you can't. Be accountable to your word. That kind of brand credibility is your credit, your ledger. Now, the second thing is, though, that branding does matter, and people use these heuristics. We're all so busy. So people, Stanford is not a competency, but you'd think it was based on how people evaluate entrepreneurs. So I knew I wasn't going to have that in my favor. I knew I didn't have the network and friends and family. So I did leverage accelerators. I really stalked the industry, and I said, which accelerators are going to get me the most visibility at my stage? So I went to Clean Tech Open first, because I felt that if I could get a high enough placement, I'd get a lot more exposure to the investors and the customers and mentors that I wanted. So I didn't mess around with Clean Tech Open. When I do something like that, I clear off my calendar. I work 70 hours a week. I'm in it to win it. Like, I'm not there to mess around. So I made sure that anytime I went after something, I was well prepared. I talked to people who'd done it, and I knew what was going to be required to win or make a good showing. And then I would leverage that win into the next win. So, Clean Tech Open led to, going after our SBR, led to lots of other opportunities, some of which I can't announce yet, but I wish I could. And so I think really be smart about how you leverage that branding. Look for things that are widely known among the audience that you're hoping to reach, and do your homework, like be prepared. So I think those are, for me, really the momentum thing. And, just believe that you're going to succeed. Don't spend a lot of time perseverating on the nose. Like, to the extent that you can, like, do yoga, do meditation, get into good therapy. If somebody says no, like, especially now in fundraising, I feel like part of the reason we were able to raise so fast, every time someone says no, in my mind, I just go, I feel so sorry for you. I'm going to feel so bad when we just kill it and you didn't invest. That's like, bummer for you. Okay, on to the next person.
And you will probably hear more no's. Just
Yeah.
aware of that. If you want to build a company, you will very likely hear more no's, of whether it's investment or anything, then you will hear yeses. My son tells me I say no to everything, but somehow has like this very luxurious bedroom. But he tells me I say no to everything, but like that, that is starting a company. You will hear lots of no's. Don't take it personal. It's usually not about you or your company. It is usually very substantial.
Wendy?
Yeah, I agree about not taking it personally. It really usually is about the other person and not you. For me, my best resource, and the resource that I think has served me best, again, I don't have a background specifically in this, what I'm doing. I mean, I've never developed a grasp before. That was something that just, science, and I feel like I can learn anything, but that's the point, is you are your own best resource. You can't kid yourself about what you know and what you don't know. And if you don't know it, you sure as hell better learn it, and you better become an expert, and then you can become a well-respected expert that will be called on. I'm now getting regular people saying, hey, can you come talk at this or come talk at that, because of the level of expertise that I've developed. But I've done that. So there's no shortcut. There's absolutely no shortcut, but there's lots and lots of resources that are out there for free. There's lots of information that you need to be collecting all the time. I'm in Atlanta right now, and we're based in Olympia, Washington, but I spent the past day and a half learning, literally absorbing everything I possibly could at this conference that I also was a speaker at. But knowledge is really the power that is going to push you over the edge. It also is going to teach you whether you have a good product or not. Because if you, the more you learn, the more you understand about your industry, and I don't just mean the science, I also mean about the industry or multiple industries. The more you learn about what is actually sort of reading the tea leaves and what's going to happen in the future. A lot of data points that you have to connect, but you can't do that without work. So you really need to be just constantly acquiring knowledge, and that's the resource that I think is most important, at least for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one thing that most, as we mentioned, it takes money to build things, and it takes funding to build a startup. Would be great to understand, what that experience was like for you in terms of raising venture capital. Obviously, we're all badass women here, and it's still a very challenging environment for women entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, to raise venture capital. I think the stat is 2.3% of all female founding teams have raised just 2.3% of venture capital this year, which is an astounding statistic. Mixed gender co-founders have raised 11.7% of funding. So in other words, 86% of venture funding still only goes to men. And I think that's, something that you've probably all experienced firsthand today. So would love to hear your experience talking a bit about the fundraising process and maybe how, being a badass female entrepreneur has kind of impacted that.
Sure. So I'll go again, since we're going in this order. At first, fundraising for me was really hard. And just at a moment of transparency here, it was hard for me because I was not used to hearing no. I was a person who generally got what I wanted, whether it was because I was really good at what I did or something. So I remember like my first email of, well, we're going to pass this time. I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, that was strange. And then the next time it happened, it was like, is it me? Why don't they like me? What am I doing? And then I just kind of like got used to it. And then I started getting yeses, and then the yeses overshadowed the no's, and you just kind of keep going. What I will say, and this may seem kind of foo-foo, woo-woo, but I noticed a very deliberate, like a very staunch difference when I shifted my mindset from chasing funding to receiving funding. I made a very deliberate decision that I don't want to have to convince people. I don't want to have to chase you down for checks. I don't want to feverishly pitch every investor I encounter. There's nothing fun about that. It's anxiety driven. That's a scarcity mindset, right? Like I have to get this money right now, and I'm gonna chase everyone and tell them how great I am, and blah blah blah. And when I started just saying I want to attract aligned investors, and I want to attract aligned customers and aligned partners, people started emailing me, hey, you need to meet this person. Hey, let me connect you to that person. And when you just put it out there, like, here's what I'm looking for. Here are the people I want to work with. Here are the types of funds I am interested in working with. And when I say put it out there, I mean physically. Post it on LinkedIn, put it on Twitter, put it somewhere where people can see. And you will be really surprised at how many people just know other people, and they might not even know you, but they want to help that person that connect with something, right? So then they'll make that introduction, or they'll tag them on your post, or they'll DM you, or they'll do something to get you connected with people. And I will say in the last 2 weeks alone, I have, through no efforts of my own, been connected to 7 or 8 different investor groups from other people saying, I think this would be a good fit. You need to talk to this person. And man, the weight of not having to like chase money. I mean, it seems really glamorous, right? Because there's all these docuseries about Theranos and Uber and all these startups that raise these millions and billions of dollars, and they make it look a certain way. And I'm here to tell you that it is not that way. Like it's not that way at all. So when it doesn't go the way that you see it going on television, don't be discouraged and ask yourself, like, who do I want to work with? What types of funds do I want to work with? What types of people do I want to work with? And be very deliberate in who you pitch to, who you talk to, who you try to sell to, because you know, customers are they can be just as much of a pain in the other side. If you, I mean, it's all like a marriage. Like, you're married to your customers, you're married to your investors, you're married to your co-founders, which is why I am a solo founder. But just know what you're bringing, and know that at the end of the day, you know more about your business than anyone else does, or at least you should. And if you don't, you need to fix that.
Tanya?
I just put a link down in the, when we're talking about fundraising, well, there are just so many things to say here, and just like everything Carlanda said, I just wanted to keep like the fire icon. I kept putting it up there because it was just like, woo! And it is true. You know, it's been interesting. I just want to say as a sidebar, I am also obsessed with like the Uber, super pumped. I read the book, the Theranos ones, the WeWork, all of those. I'm like, I have to watch these folks because I'm like, I don't want to become that. And at the same time, I think my therapist was like, you know, if you are a narcissist, you wouldn't be worried about being a narcissist. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, if you say so, you would know the best. But their confidence, you know, I mean, you want to lean out over your skis, not to the point where you're delusional, which is, I would say, you know, one of the things about fundraising that people don't talk about a lot, but for me is super important, is business fundamentals, right? Like, even if you're going to be a venture-backed software company, building software, yeah, it can seem easy, but you can also incur a lot of technical debt and then get jumped over by the next person who doesn't have that same level of technical debt. I mean, I loved Friendster. I liked MySpace. You know, Facebook was fun while it lasted, but you can very quickly be eclipsed because you generate so much technical debt if you take on VC too early. Like, being first isn't always best. Depending, you know, it really depends on your product and your cogs, but you need to do your market research, make sure the market's big enough. You kind of never know until you get there. You also need to have a general understanding of whether or not there's enough opportunity in there, there's enough margin to profitably grow your business, like minimum 25% margin, so that you can grow, hopefully more. And you know what some of the mechanics are that, and scenario planning, like what happens if I sell this many. You know, I'm a very bottoms up forecaster. So if I say we're going to hit 106 million in ARR, I have thought about it from sideways, top down, bottom up, over to the left, over to the right. What if this happens? What if that happens? And I do think you need to go through those mental exercises. So just like if you were doing martial arts, you're drilling that kick, you're drilling that kick, you're drilling it from this angle until when the punch comes at you, you know, it's like everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. So it really just becomes about what muscles you've been exercising the most. And so before I started the company, I'm a relentless saver. I'll say that I lived for a while in Mexico where there were a lot of like super rich tax evaders. And again, while I wouldn't take any life lessons from them, one guy did say to me, he's like, you know what the secret of being rich is? Pay for everything in cash. Like, don't live beyond your means. And I have taken that to heart, particularly as a single mom who needs to make sure that I always have enough. So I'm a saver. I always saved up. You know, I've built a lot of equity in my home, which I bought very, very young. As soon as I could afford it, I bought it. And I don't live beyond my means. And this is not a lecture. If that's not your thing, don't worry. And so when I first started my company, I treated it the same way. What's my budget going to be? What are my forecasts? And, you know, in my particular case, I wanted to accelerate that growth rate faster. So I did want to take on venture money because it would allow me, I was only limited by how much capital I had. And I'd seen in my last company and my founder's last company that being undercapitalized was almost just as bad when there is the potential for growth. But I think take some honest looks at that stuff and really use good financial management. Find a fractional CFO who's worked in your industry or, you know, great investors and do that first to see whether or not you actually do need fundraising dollars, or if this is something that you can bootstrap for a little while, and when is the right time to take on that outside capital, whether it's a loan, whether it's friends and family, et cetera. And then everything Carlanda said, like 520%. Know your worth. Do not waste your time. Like, if you feel like your time is being wasted in a fetch me this rock and fetch me this rock, and maybe we'll give you $0 to $50,000. Like, if it feels like it's being wasted, it probably is. find a very polite way to excuse yourself from that process and just quickly move on to somebody who believes in you and is a better fit. They're aligned with your vision. And like Carlanda said, it's not about you. You don't know. Maybe they're still raising their fund and they're not investing out of the fund yet. Maybe they are about to retire. You just never know what's going on. Maybe they've invested in or are doing due diligence on a company that they see as competitive with you, whether or not that is true. They're not necessarily going to tell you. Maybe they invested, I've had circumstances where I walked into a room, I did a 10-minute pitch, and then one person who had been burned really badly on a business that seemed a little bit like mine spent 10 minutes using me as a therapist about their terrible experience. So again, it isn't about you. Move on quickly, know your worth, follow good principles, and do scenario planning too, so that you know how to allocate your cash and when is the right point in your business model to take on that dilutive financing. And then I hope that Wendy will talk about this, and certainly Leon will. If your innovation qualifies, if it's something that has a long product development cycle, you should definitely look at government grants and non-dilutive funding, like contracts, for us, contracts with utilities who will pay you to develop your product with very few strings attached, honestly.
I love that. And last but not least, again, I'm sorry, Wendy.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I have bootstrapped this company, as I had said before, but I also received a phase 1 SBIR grant last year through DOE with the help of VertueLab. And that has been tremendous to get us, 9 months ahead. I mean, really genuinely. So we are actually just now, just so everyone knows, starting to raise funding. This is our first funding for this company. I own it right now, and so our cap table is really clean. But I find that I did just what Tanya was saying, is that I looked out, how much money am I going to need? How do I not spend money on certain things? How do I find ways to leverage different opportunities, leverage different people? So it's really about, for me, it was really about holding on to as much of the company that I could for as long as I could, and I felt comfortable with, and again, was not underfunded for the opportunities, not missing opportunities, because I wanted to retain as much equity as I could until it was time, not only for funding to come in, but I felt very confident and comfortable in our technology. I felt very confident and comfortable with just what Tanya said. If this thing flips upside down and goes underground and comes back up and then it blows up, is this all still going to work? And so I really don't want to have people invest in something that I don't truly believe in. And now my mindset is, boy, if you pass up this investment in my company in Hexas, you're a fool, because what we're going to do is help change the world. I mean, we are going to disrupt without interrupting. We really have our shit together, so to speak. We say badass, so I can say shit, right? The other thing is, I agree, you really need to be comfortable with who's going to invest in you. And I have a little story about that. So I started sort of talking to people in the fall, and I've had other venture capital firms and even investment banking groups contact me. So even before I was ready to go, I'm not really ready. They said, well, can you just talk to us? So I just talked to us. So there's a couple, and this lovely woman from a firm in Boston, she set it all up. We were all excited, and her male counterpart, a partner, gets on, and I'm doing my little pitch for 2 minutes, and he stops me in the middle. He goes, wait. I just looked on your LinkedIn profile, and nothing in your LinkedIn profile says that you're qualified to do what you're doing. And I'm telling you, at that moment, I was very close to saying, I looked on yours, and you're not even qualified to make that statement about me. But I didn't say that. I very nicely said, I was lost for words, because I really wanted to lay into the guy, because seriously, dude. And so I just said, and that was that kind of that. And so I will probably never talk to that firm again. And if they come back, like Tanya says, and want to invest in me, no, I don't think so. Bye-bye. All done. So it's really important that you feel comfortable and confident in yourself, like Carlanda was saying, because people be lucky to invest in this. And then I would say, the other thing that I found from my perspective, and I know there's someone's been in the chat about the agricultural side of things, is that I've seen the high tech venture capitalists change their name, get a new fund, and all of a sudden become climate tech investors. Oh, that's been a thrill because they have absolutely no clue. So it's also important to know the background of the people that potentially would invest in you, because they actually have a clue and can make a decision about what you're doing. So that level of expertise is important. Otherwise, again, you're just talking to people and they're not going to get it, and not even ask the right questions. So.
Amazing. This has all been incredibly helpful. I've been on the side jotting down a bunch of notes as well. And I'm sure everyone else who's been listening on has as well. I know we're running a bit behind schedule, but I just thought the insights were so incredible. I think next we have the community videos, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Trisha?
Yeah, we're going to take a break for a second here. We're going to hear a little bit from Climate People and from Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability Network.
Hi, my name is Lisa Ann Pinkerton, founder and chairwoman of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, and thank you for inviting us to be a part of this event. We are a networking organization focused on supporting women and men in their career paths to build a green economy. This manifests itself in weekly or monthly events, and we have all virtual events right now, so you're welcome to join us from your living room if you'd like. So anybody can join our organization as an attendee, or you can become a member. We also have corporate members, companies like GE, Canadian Solar, First Solar. We're also very well known for a big TED-style conference that we give every year in the San Francisco Bay Area called WCS Talks. That's hosted by Google. We're very proud of that. It's our flagship event, and we use it as our annual fundraiser. I welcome you to go to our website and learn more about what we do, watch our videos, follow us on social media, and get involved. We're here to have fun as well as growing our professional careers, and we look forward to you being part of our community. Thank you very much.
Next up, we're going to hear from Climate People.
After an ad plays, so 1 second.
Oh, okay. Good old ads, huh? While we're waiting for that to queue up, you probably saw in the chat, we're going to send all those resources out in a follow-up email to everybody. Just give us a day or two to compile that. Right, thanks Cassidy for bringing those up. And then Kim, how about you come back with me, and we're gonna go into our panel that's gonna cover a lot of the funding pathways. So we're gonna meet Leon and Shondra. Back to you, Kim.
Awesome. Great. Awesome. Great to see you both, Leon and Shondra. So this is going to be our funding panel, which talks about different sources of funding. We talked a little about it a little bit on the entrepreneurship panel, but can really get into the weeds here. So introducing both Leon and Shondra. Leon Wolf is a grant writing specialist supporting SBIR and STTR and technology proposals, and presently is the manager for the statewide SBIR STTR assistance program at VertueLab. He has helped over 100 companies and organizations to prepare SBR, STTR, and other proposals to USDA, NSF, NIH, EPA, and DOE, and has delivered dozens of training sessions on funding. He's worked at Hewlett-Packard in Corvallis, Oregon for 25 years as a manufacturing engineer, engineering manager, and R&D manager, and has a bachelor's in chemical engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and a master's in chemical engineering from the State University of New York at Buffalo. And then introducing Shondra, who's an emerging fund manager. After working as a technology investment banker, she co-founded TBC Capital, an education-first advisory and consulting firm offering on-demand CFO, business development, and strategy services for VC-backed companies and small businesses with 1 million in revenue or more annually. Through her efforts, her clients have raised over 7 million in startup capital, and she's currently based in New York and focuses her work in consumer tech, CPG, and marketplaces. Really excited to have both of you on. And I think would be really helpful, obviously, to share your guys' experience and hear more about, more in depth about how entrepreneurs can fund and grow their business venture early on. Maybe quickly, it'd be great if both of you can do your 60 to 90 second pitch and just share a bit more about your work and what stage of business growth that you help. Leon, we can start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And thank you, everybody who is on the video for making time today to come hear this. As said, I'm Leon Wolf. I work for VertueLab, the host and the originator of the Badass Women Conference with Women in Science for the last 5 years. It's great to be here again. I am based in Portland, but help companies around the Northwest get a specific type of federal funding, which is called SBIR and STTR, Small Business Innovation Research Grants. And we do this by helping entrepreneurs like the great ones you just heard in the previous panel, locate the right funding source for them, as well as help with all the nuts and bolts of both writing a competitive proposal and then filling in all of the bureaucratic and check boxes that the federal agencies require. It's really complicated, and all of VertueLab assistance is totally free of charge. Thanks for the great intro, by the way, Kim. I am a chemical engineer, so I can geek out on most things with the best of the entrepreneurs, but I sort of wear many hats and span into the business world as well. So this is a great source of funding, as some of the other entrepreneurs have said. It's for early stage companies that maybe pass that friends and family round, have a good kind of concept, but really haven't built a full prototype or really hired anyone else yet. And the government, in fact, brands this as America's seed fund. So it's very much like a seed or angel investment. So anyway, thanks to all the other entrepreneurs and everyone who has worked with us in the past. It's been a mutual pleasure to both help you and to learn about all your cool tech and see some of the comments in the chat right now. And I'm happy to answer questions both in the panel as well as during the networking. And I believe we'll also be potentially passing around a schedule for one-on-ones in case people want to speak to me at a later date. Thanks.
And Shondra?
Hi guys, so my role is not necessarily as an investor, it's more so helping companies to get funding, right? So whether that is through VC funding, whether that is through other types of funding, credit lines, loans, things like that. So I'm here as a way to discuss some of the other ways and some of the hacks that I've seen my companies use in order to fund their businesses. I mainly work with companies that are VC backed, but a lot of them are pre-seed. So we're talking very early. We're talking, some have just gotten an idea, right? And they're just starting development and working with them through their Series A. So there's a lot of different ways that you can fund your business throughout the path of growth. And so hopefully we'll be able to talk about some of those different ways as you're getting to different stages of your business.
Amazing. And I probably should have done this at the beginning, but obviously it'd be helpful to kind of lay out what are the different sources of funding and what does that sort of value chain look like, which I can quickly talk through. I come more from the venture capital side, but that's definitely not the only source of funding. Early funding can range from using your own money, e.g. lines of credit, to crowdsourcing. So there's a bunch of crowdsourcing websites out there. I'm sure everyone knows Kickstarter, but there's also equity crowdfunding, which is instead of, upfront selling your product, actually selling equity. There's microloans, obviously grants, non-dilutive, both from governments, foundations, family offices, and then obviously funding from angel investors and venture capital. So I think, the three of us kind of sit across a few different pockets of the spectrum and can maybe talk to what exactly it looks like to evaluate an applicant or investment on all different kind of stages of the spectrum. So maybe first, Leon, do you want to talk about what is the ideal kind of target profile, business profile for the maybe early stage grants and government SBIR kind of world?
Great. Yeah, thanks for the chance to highlight that. First of all, I should say that I do not control the funding. This is federal government funding. I just help people get it. I wish I had a $4 billion fund to give to entrepreneurs, but unfortunately, if I did, I'd probably be doing something else right now. So the typical profile that, and there are many different the world of federal grants is very complicated. There's many different things. And we don't just support SBIR and STTR grants at VertueLab. We do some other forms of clean tech grants as well. But for 90% of the grants I work with, which are this Small Business Innovation Research Program, typically it has to be past a university stage of technology. It doesn't have to be a university spin-off, but very often is, but it has to be kind of pre-VC. And these companies need to have some kind of what we call secret sauce and innovation that is science, math, maybe even just computer science or engineering and technology oriented innovation that is somehow going to give them a competitive advantage and meet customer needs in a new and novel way. So we look for companies that are kind of an ideal mix of really cool technology, but not just a science project. We also want exactly what the entrepreneurs you heard for the last hour talked about, is really good hustlers who get out of the lab and get out and talk to customers, understand how that technology solves a problem, makes society better, and meets a customer need. I don't help other nonprofits. I don't help other state groups. This has to be a for-profit business. The government is funding this because they want to grow jobs and a competitive industry and keep the US competitive. So we look for kind of a good mix, a sweet spot of not too late, not too early, and also not totally geeky science projects without any real societal or market opportunity. Over to Shondra.
Awesome. And Shondra, I know you kind of see across the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
But I think maybe for the sake of some of the entrepreneurs here and for me as well, talking to some pieces of that spectrum that aren't just venture capital, that aren't just equity, for example, lines of credit, microloans, and other sources of maybe non-dilutive funding that isn't just equity capital.
Yeah, so a lot of the founders that I work with are, depending on the platforms that they're using to sell their products, one of the things that you guys can think about is capital that is revenue-based, right? So, if we're not thinking about giving pieces of the business away or I guess you could say it's a loan, but basically some platforms will look at the amount of money that you're making on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and decides to give you a loan or a line of credit based on that. And then based on your sales, you'll be able to pay that money back as you're making sales, right? So there are ways that people are funding their business through revenue-based funding. There are also, if you're looking at, if you have, you know, lots of invoices that can be paid, there's also ways that you can have capital given to you based on some of those invoices that will come in. So let's say it's a net 30 or a net 90 payment schedule. There are organizations that can fund your business by helping you with cash flow, right? There's also a lot of companies that I work with. There's a lot of platforms, right? Where if you're looking at you know, if you have inventory that you need to pay for, other very expensive marketing costs, things like that, they will front you the money and charge, like every 30 days, will charge a percentage based on those invoices that they paid on your behalf. I think we talked about lines of credit as well. So there's much larger lines of credit, and all of those things are really based on your current needs. So, you know, it depends on the structure of your business, depends on the type of business that you have, but there are different structures, and there's different, I guess, payment terms based on your product and your sales cycles. So there's a lot of different things that come into it. So it's not like one size fits all, but there's also, you know, a lot of people, if you're thinking about funding your business through credit cards, right? So, you know, a lot of my companies that I work with use Brex, or they use the Plum American Express card. And there's another credit card that just came out for startups called Row. So there's all of these very specific funding options for startups, right? And so instead of thinking about, do I just want to go into a bank and get a loan? Do I just want to, you know, get the normal business American Express? There's a lot of research that can be done to look at solutions that are specific to your business type. And obviously, like, without knowing exactly who's on the call and the exact type of structure you have, it's hard to really give you like a specific answer, but there's specific cards and specific ways and platforms that will fund you based on your business type. And I'm happy to talk to anybody further if you have specific questions, and I can give you kind of the suggestions that me and my clients use.
I think there's already a few questions actually just following up on that in the chat.
Let's see, Shondra, can you give us some tactical ways that we should choose and then start building a relationship with the banker? Okay, so yes, one of the things you want to look at is their services, right? So one of the things that came up back in 2020 when PPP loans and all of that, the EIDL and all of those government subsidies came through, some of my clients didn't have a relationship with their banker, and so they weren't able to get those loans because they didn't have someone that could give them the heads up, like, hey, you need to have this paperwork in by X date. So what you want to look at is you want to look at banks that have a very strong small business practice. And so when you're going in, you're specifically saying to them, I need an account, I need a bank account, I need a savings account, I need a credit card. If you need a credit card, you may not want to use your credit card from your from that institution, but typically that's part of like the package that you can talk with them. But you also want to specify that you do want a banker. Some of the institutions that we've worked with, they only gave you a specific banker if you had a specific amount of, or like a threshold amount of money that you've deposited into the account. But I always suggest that when we are opening accounts, that we are very specific about the type of service that we need. And a lot of my companies now are even not using some of the larger institutions. So we're looking into digital institutions where we're having a better customer service, where we're able to actually email our bankers. Some of the bank organizations that we're using are First Republic. Silicon Valley Bank is very good for startups. Who else are we using online wise? Wayflyer, we're using them. Row is a good example. I mentioned them earlier. So there are online solutions, and then there are the institutional banks where they typically don't have that level of customer service. where some of the like Grasshopper Bank, Silicon Valley, they work with startups. And I would really, I would suggest kind of going with the bank that you know has a reputation working with startups, because you'll be able to get much more from them, and they'll be much more equipped to serve you, and kind of you can ask them direct questions. We text with some of our bankers, so that's how close we are. So I would really look towards banks that are specifically for startups. Okay, what else is in here?
Oh,
I can wait. It's not
okay.
really yet.
I know we unfortunately don't have too much time for the funding panel. I'll just quickly touch upon venture capital a little bit, which is always a elephant in the room. When does it make sense to raise venture capital? Does it even make sense to raise venture capital, as some of the previous entrepreneurs talked about? I think the answer varies. There's obviously different shades and different types of venture capital. So at the earliest kind of pre-seed stages, you're still in ideation phase. But you do need a little bit of capital to, build out your MVP or recruit maybe 1 or 2 team members. There's a few different shades of venture capital there. So there's angel investors or syndicates, usually made up of high net worth individuals, previous founders. I can tell you from my experience, there's a lot of high net worth individuals that are now looking at climate specifically. So that's an avenue to look at. A few names to throw out there. There's Creo Syndicate, Vectors Angel. There's also a lot of these rolling funds now, investment vehicles structured like venture funds, but employing angel-less rolling funds structure. So My Climate Journey Collective, Climate Capital, Footprint Coalition, all have pre-seed level kind of sources of funding for startups now in the space as well. When you're early stage, you have a product or solution, you're going to market, maybe have a little bit of traction in terms of customers and revenue, and looking to step on the gas pedal. Then you can start looking at more institutional venture funds. So this is when you get to kind of the seed and Series A stage. Obviously, there's venture capital firms that play or focus on, one or multiple of those different stages. I think here, that's when you really have to think about, who do I want in my investor syndicate? Do I want, venture funds who are strategics, who can help me scale and grow the business? A lot of times that comes in the form of corporate VCs, CVCs, who, for example, if you're, building an EV company, would be great to have Toyota Ventures or BMW I Ventures in the round as you think about scaling some of your commercial business, and having companies who could be potential customers also aligned on the cap table side. Typically, you would want also a lead or someone who sets the terms for the round. When I say sets the terms, as in, what is the valuation? What does the governance look like? Who has board seats? And a lot of the kind of more technical nuance side of venture capital. So typically the lead is the venture firm that takes the biggest check size in the round. So they're the one that gets to set the terms, and then followers will be the ones that will follow in onto the deal at the same terms, same valuation, et cetera. There's been a ton of venture capital pouring into the climate tech space. Specifically in CTVC, we tracked $40 billion of venture capital coming in to climate tech companies in 2021, which is very clearly record setting and super exciting. And I think driving a lot more entrepreneurs into this space as well. And I can sync with Trisha and Cassidy afterwards to drop some of these names we have on here. And we've been tracking a lot of the most active investors and early stage angels as well in this space. So that's pretty high level. Feel free to ping me after this or ask me afterwards about a little bit more granularly what we look for in venture capital and all those things. But that's kind of a quick overview. I'm not sure how much more time we have, but I do want to ask one more question because I think it's really relevant to this group. I asked this to the entrepreneurs on that panelist, but as I said, the funding gap for women founders has improved slightly, but is still pretty vast when compared to non-female founders. How are you seeing things improve? Maybe Leon and Shondra on your side of things, whether that gap has kind of closed or whether it's still pretty apparent, and what can we do about it?
Yes. Well, I think the gap is closing, especially in the last 10 years, but there's still more progress that can be made. In the federal funding world, I'm going to kind of lump the answers together for women-owned startups and science and engineering-based entrepreneurs, as well as some of the other underserved populations. And the government, you know, especially in the Biden administration, has definitely increased the focus on both programs that support those underserved communities, as well as funding for entrepreneurial assistance organizations that also serve to do that. I've seen the staffing at agencies themselves change, both on the review panels for grants as well as in the management. And I think that's really a good thing. I look at diversity very holistically, and I think the whole system needs to change. You can't just have one isolated program that provides some areas of support if the whole system is biased or slanted. So I think that's actually been a change that has been most noticeable in the last 10 years. And especially if there are any tech-based researchers at universities on this panel, at today's meeting, I'd urge you to get involved and just, it's a small stipend to be on a review panel, but the more women and minorities that can pack these review panels, the more and more equitable they'll be. Or, I mean, if you're really into it, go into a job in some federal agencies or at federal labs. The other thing I'd like to say is that, you know, it's still playing catch up, but there's a lot of assistance programs with a focus on underserved communities. Some of these are at HBCUs, some are with minority and women serving organizations. There's some good supplements that you can get. One in particular, Department of Energy, for example, will allow a company to get a bonus on top of their grant to hire an intern if it's from one of the disadvantaged communities. So there's a lot going on. There's no one program, I think, that's going to be a magic bullet, but I think it's very encouraging. And again, please contact me afterwards or in the network if you want to know any more about specific programs. Thanks.
For me, to be like, 1,000% honest, if I'm looking at Black women specifically, there have been strides made, but not many. I know many founders who are still struggling with, millions of dollars in revenue, still struggling to raise. And I don't know if it's their problem. I don't know if it's our problem. I think it's a broader systemic problem in which we need to look at who's actually writing the checks. So it's very hard for me to say, yes, there has been progress made because in the one-off situations that I've been kind of privy to, I have seen Black women or diverse founders be able to raise, but on a broader scale, there are still too many founders that have great businesses that cannot get funding. And so, yes, it has improved, but the question is who's writing the checks and how do we make it so that we have more of them, so that the founders that are running amazing businesses have VCs and funders to go to invest in them.
Awesome. A lot more to talk about here, but I think it's time to open it up a bit to the all panelists panel and let the audience finally ask all their questions that they have been having in the chat. So maybe we can bring the rest of the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneur panel back on.
Just give us a second, Cassidy, and I will get everybody invited back up here.
Cool. And in the meantime, feel free to chime in the chat, I think, with questions. Now, I know we had a few in the upwards in the chat we can also walk through, but if anyone wants to ask anything, now is the time.
And you did a great job, Kim, of everybody was watching the chat, I think, and trying to get some things answered. I don't know. We'll look back and see if there's some other ones that got missed. If you posted a question and we didn't get to it, go ahead and repost it. We'll watch for that. I know Claire had asked, when bringing on a partner, what equity is an appropriate amount if they hold an instrumental COO role. So I don't know, that can vary. I think we were just having a conversation with my colleagues this morning quite a bit. So maybe Kim, you've probably seen some variations out there. But yeah, Tanya, Carlanda, Wendy, you've been part of some other startups. How does that vary? Let me repost the question down in here too.
We actually asked our attorney for, I mean, this is really tough right now, just in general, because hiring is so crazy. To look at when you achieve, if you're going to take on venture capital, you obviously need to be worried about dilution. I mean, who cares if you have 100% of a company that's worth nothing, you know, or that doesn't grow as fast as you want? That said, you know, I've known personally, I've been a peer mentor to many founders who raised tons of money, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. And at the end of the day, they owned barely any of the company that they founded and worked so hard to build. So dilution is real. It's pretty mathy. I mean, for me, I'm always like, oh, whoa, it feels counterintuitive. But my attorney, when we incorporated as a C Corp, and we walked through a lot of different scenarios for where we thought we were going to go with fundraising. Remember, we'd done our financial plan and scenarios. And then we looked at compensation structures. What is the, for different positions within the organization, VC funds out there, if you work with venture capitalists or no venture capitalists, they have access to management reports that look at the compensation survey of a fully diluted company. So for example, CTO, COO roles who were a founder and a non-founder. How much salary will they have? How much equity will they have once you're fully diluted? And then, you know, you can kind of do the math backwards to when you start with founding. In general, though, I would say, you know, when you give someone equity, whether that is an investor or an option pool for employees, you're making like a 4 to 5 year commitment to a relationship with that person, minimum. So this is putting a ring on somebody's finger. And so I really do believe that there should be vesting on those shares, and that you should don't just throw stuff around. When I watch that WeWork documentary and I see that there's like more shares for everyone, here's some shares. And I'm just like, oh my God, it just makes my skin crawl. I don't know if, you know, Kim or Shondra, if you folks have seen, you know, the best case and the worst case on a number of different circumstances, but from my perspective, at least, it just like everything else, you should walk through some different scenarios with equity and pay, and you should look at compensation scales and what that person's skill set brings to your team that you're missing.
I would say also, what is so you said a COO role, but are they taking a COO? Like, is it going to be an executive level role, or is it just head of operations? One of the things that I've seen companies do is not bring them on as a COO, start them at I guess, lower, I don't know if I would use that word, but a lower role in which you can kind of work up to what that role, that eventual role will be, so that you don't have to give upfront equity. And that way, you know, you can give up 2% or so, right? And then I've seen COOs or executive or partners. It's hard kind of without knowing exactly what it means to be a partner. But I've seen people come in, CTOs and things like that, get up to 12%. So I don't know if you want to bring them in at that level, unless you do want to bring them in at that level, in which it does vary. But one of the tactics that you can use is by bringing them in as a head of operations, or something that doesn't require that C-level title, and then work up to whatever the equity compensation will be.
Yeah, and
just go in addition to that. So when I legally formed Bodify as a legal entity, we did a carve out. So we set aside a certain amount of shares. So when you we incorporated as a Delaware C Corp, you get 10 shares, let's say 10,000, you create 10,000 shares when you start your company. And then you set aside an amount of shares for your cap table, investors, stuff like that. You set aside a certain amount of shares for employees, associates, team members. And then based on, and this is just what I'm doing, based on their importance to the company, they get a percentage of those shares. So let's say a carve out of 20% for associates. So anyone that you bring in a C-suite can get up to 5% of that 20%. But that means that you have to be very careful about who you bring in at that level. And then everyone else, like, you know, kind of gets a percentage of the tiers that you have. And it keeps it fair, keeps it equitable. You can, there are some people who rather take a salary instead of equity. That's great too. But, you know, find out what it is they want. Speaking from prior experience, my last 2 ventures, I did have co-founders with both of those people. And we went into it, the first venture, we went into it, no vesting. We were just 50-50 owner. And she decided she wanted to do something else with her life, but walked off with 50% of our company. So then in the next venture, we were 50%, but we vested up to that amount. So we both started at 0. And the longer we were in, and to clarify what I mean when I say vesting, the longer you are earn up to your cap. So if you bring on a coworker, if you bring on, well, I mean, a technically a coworker, but if you bring on a co-founder or an associate and you say, okay, I'll give you 10% equity, but you got to work here for 3 years before you get that, then every month they get a piece of that, or every year they get a piece of it. In case they quit, they don't, or you have to let them go, or, you know, something happens, they don't walk away with that equity and haven't done anything that you really needed them to do. And it can be based on time, it can be based on milestones. With one of our developers, when you deliver these things, then you get your equity. If you don't deliver these things, then you don't get your equity, because this is the exact reason that I'm giving you equity, right? So, and that it keeps everyone motivated, and it makes sure everyone has skin in the game. And very important to make sure the people that you're partnering with are, they know that you're a startup and not a corporation that has been around for decades. Some people don't really know what they're getting into when they sign up to work for a startup. It's very fast paced, things always change. And people like to believe that, you know, I can handle it. A lot of people can't, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you just need to know that, because, you know, when stuff starts hitting the fan and they don't have the appetite for it, then you start losing people, and now you have to rehire, and it's you know, pain. So
I would add to that we put in a cliff. So it's a 4-year vesting period with a 1-year cliff, because there are people who after 9 months go, oh God, I can't do this, there's too much stress, or something else comes up, or so forth. And you don't want them after 12 months walking away with a piece of the company that they may have vested into, but then be gone. So, or you may want to say, you know, this is not working out, and let them go. And you really don't want to let them go with a piece of your company. So to give yourself 12 months to make that decision.
Thank you, everybody. I don't mean to like cut out, but we're over time. There is never enough time for this event. We even went a half an hour longer than last year because we ran into this, but we ate into our networking time just a little bit. But I want to say thank you so much to each of you for giving back. Tanya, you talked about this earlier, and it was one of your things as far as, you know, giving back to the community. All of you did that today, and I just really appreciate that. Obviously, you were invited to this because you just shared such meaty information with everybody. We probably could have kept going for an hour, and we're still holding half of our attendance. So people obviously stayed on with us. Kim, thank you for moderating. Again, we're going to jump over to our networking with climate people. Natalie's come up. There we go. There's Natalie. Natalie's going to host us in our speed networking. So stay on if you want to meet people. Even introverts can enjoy this. We're just going to send around a few minutes at a time.
Even introverts.
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes it gets weird, awkward meeting people, but 3 minutes is just enough time to get to know each other very briefly. And Melissa, you're up here as well. Do you have any closing comments you want to make?
I just want to really thank all the panelists, such amazing tips and resources and advice that you shared today. And so I'm really thankful that you all shared your stories with us.
Perfect. Well, Well, Natalie, welcome to Badass Women Entrepreneurs.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah. Oh, go ahead. What were you saying?
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll start by giving a quick little introduction about me and about Climate People, and then we'll dive right into the networking session. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for both VertueLab and Women in Science for piecing this all together. It's been so insightful, and honestly, Climate People is so honored to be a part of this. But yeah, like Trisha said, my name is Natalie, and I'm the marketing lead at Climate People. Climate People, like you saw in the video, is a climate tech recruitment agency dedicated to decarbonizing the economy through placing mission-driven talent into climate tech careers, focus on software, data, product, and user experience recruitment across all climate sectors. So yeah, I know that's a lot of words, but essentially Climate People's sole mission is to make a direct impact by mobilizing a workforce transition to work on climate. So as you heard in the funding panel, and as we all know, climate tech investments are surging around the world. So all of that means that there has been and will continue to be a significant wave of climate entrepreneurs creating solutions that address the climate crisis head on. And as we all know, an influx in funding equals an even greater increase in demand, which results in jobs. And these jobs require quality talent. So that's where Climate People comes into play. Our business model is twofold. One, we work with mission-driven candidates who are looking to make an impact through their careers, and we help them land their dream job in climate. And then two, we work directly with established and aspiring entrepreneurs like yourselves, whose companies are working to move that needle closer to net zero. So all this to say, and again, as we all know, we're in a race against time to combat climate change, and we need to deliver hiring solutions quickly to help these companies grow and scale. And while I've reiterated it countless times, our mission is to get more people working on climate. However, we're also extremely proud to donate 1% of every placement fee to an environmental nonprofit through 1% for the Planet's wonderful platform. So yeah, we're always open to new endeavors and would love to discuss your company's hiring needs or your individual job search. So yeah, find us at climatepeople.com, and don't hesitate to reach out to me at natalie@climatepeople.com with any questions that you may have. So yeah, like I said earlier, we're gonna hop into our networking session now. Get your LinkedIn profiles ready to share. And like Trisha said, anyone who doesn't want to participate, please leave the event now. Not kicking you out, but we don't want to leave anyone stranded when they are left in a Zoom room all alone. And then one last reminder is there may be a chance that you get placed with the same person more than once. If that's the case, just leave the breakout room, come back to the main one, and we'll put you into a new one. So yeah, we're gonna get put into our breakout rooms now. Thank you.